Thanks to Darren for that message. And if you're interested in becoming a Christian, follow the links to Elim Ireland's website, which is on the screen now.
If you've any other questions, you can email info@elimchurchireland.com. Next Sunday night's Words of Hope will be brought to us by Charlotte Curran, and we really hope you'll join us for our final week, next Sunday at 7:30.
But now we'd love you to stick around for our Q&A with Darren and our other panel members. Everybody to our Q&A session. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Darren, for your message tonight. And we're joined by our two other panelists, Natalie and Hilary. So do you guys want to just go round and introduce yourselves, who you are, where you're from, what you do? And Natalie, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Natalie. I'm 19 and I'm currently interning at APA Elim. I'm very involved in kids ministry and worship there, and I'm totally loving it. So yeah.
My name is Hilary Foy. I'm married to Bill, and we attend Hope Church in Hillsborough. We live in a little place called Donningstown, which is between Moira and Lurgan, depending on who you talk to. And we've got two little girls at 4 and 2 called Zoe and Eden.
Yeah, my name's Darren. I am in Dublin right now. We recently moved down to try and plant a church in the city, capital city, Dublin.
So tonight you might notice our panelists and our hosts are a little bit younger than what they may have been in the last few weeks. So we wanted to give you a perspective from a younger generation in terms of what this situation means to us and what hope brings to us in this. So Gemma's going to kick off with the first question.
So Darren, you talked a lot in your message about freedom and being free, but that's quite a subjective topic. It could mean different things to different people. So what do you actually mean by being free? What are you referring to?
Yeah, so freedom is like super subjective. Depends who you talk to, what they think freedom looks like for them. I guess I was really trying to speak to the fact that I think us in the West have set these things up as like our freedom goals. Like if I could just get the job, if I could just get the money, if I could just get the house, if I could just get the spouse, then I'll be free. Like it's all of these things that we've set up. But I don't think any of those things really count towards our freedom, because we've seen people historically and we see people in the media that have all of those things and they're still miserable and they're still not really free. I guess what I was alluding to was like the freedom inside a person and not on the external. Like I'm not talking about free country or free speech or freedom to travel or any of those things. I'm talking about the freedom inside of us, not even talking about those momentary things that make us feel free. I'm talking about actual freedom all of the time. Those, that deeper reality inside of humanity, like the search inside of us for freedom, the search inside of us that knows that there's something more, the search inside of humanity that knows like something's just not right, that longing inside humanity, like there must be more than this, like there must be a God, there must be a higher being, there must be something bigger than me. And I think that those questions are inside of us because God designed us for freedom, and those questions would lead us on a journey towards finding him, and the exploration of that would point us towards that. And so I am really speaking to the freedom inside of us, our internal searching, and I think it's inside the heart of every human. And I would argue that freedom is found in relationship with God. So that's what I was talking about.
Darren, you mentioned there about everybody having a longing for freedom. And Hilary, if I could maybe just direct the next question to you. I'm sure everybody has this aspiration or longing for freedom in their lives. But for people who think Christianity just provides an illusion of freedom, or it's just an aspiration of freedom, what would you say to people who maybe don't agree with that?
Yeah, this is a hard one, isn't it? Because we live in a culture that tries to tell us that there's no such thing as one truth or objective truth. And so it's really difficult to take the approach of convincing someone to accept what they see as just my version of the truth. But I suppose the reality is that without a source of truth that is higher than us, there can only ever be an illusion of freedom. So for me, a useful question to ask people in return is, well, what source of truth do you live by? And what kind of freedom is it bringing you? Because for us as Christians, true freedom is found in being who our Creator designed us to be. But the illusion of freedom is being able to do whatever you want when you want, because actually that's going to lead you into a whole lot of trouble. I was just thinking of the example, you know, of a fish that was meant to live in the ocean. If he decided one day he was going to just jump out onto the shore, pretty soon, you know, he'd be struggling for breath. And so true freedom is just living the way that you were created to live, by a God who loves you more than anyone else ever could. And I suppose what Darren was talking about, you know, one of the things that our Creator has put in us is a deep longing to know our true purpose and to know freedom in relationship with Him. And yes, does this require faith? Of course it does. But to me, it's much more logical to put my trust in a God who loves me and designed me than to put my trust in what's in here or what's in here.
Very much, Hilary. Just touching on what you were saying there about, you know, freedom. People may think that freedom would be being able to do whatever you want. Now, just direct the question to you, Natalie. A lot of people would look at Christianity and think that it's the opposite of freedom, and would think that we have to abide by certain rules. It's all about what you can and can't do. So what would you say to people who would think that how can attaching yourself to a set of rules and regulations really be freedom?
Yeah, I think it's definitely an unusual concept for people who don't follow Jesus to sort of link Christianity and freedom. And there's definitely elements that could lead to that. I think even there's a number of Christians who might decide that they won't watch TV on a Sunday, or that there has to be a certain attire worn to church, and not that we're criticizing that, but it can just be, I think, misleading for people to think it's a lifestyle just full of regulations and really intense rules. So I think, yeah, it can certainly be a confusing concept, but the thing that I like that Darren said actually there was that about finding your relationship with Jesus, that's sort of the key to freedom. And so I think the more time that I spend with God, talking to Him and just getting to know Him more and knowing His heart, I think I've just come to the conclusion that God's heart for people is that we live in freedom. You know, He loves us so much, and He wants the best for us. And so actually these biblical standards and rules that have been put in place, they're not to hinder us or to make us even feel trapped. They're actually so that we can live in the fullness of God's freedom. And I think it's definitely, it could definitely be in people's heads, you know, that God would be trying to rob us of freedom. He's putting these things in place just so we have to live to this standard, nearly like robots. But actually that's not what He wants for us at all. You know, He wants us to have our freedom enhanced nearly. And I think lots of that's by living by these rules. He's drawn us into Him, and He's making us more like Him. And who better to decide my freedom and what that looks like than the person who created me? And so definitely relationship is key to that freedom, not just the rules and regulations side of that, but actually when we explore who we are in God, that's when we find freedom.
Darren, you mentioned as well in your talk about sin and that it binds us. Some people may not understand what that means or what sin is. Could you explain what is sin and why are we bound by it before Christ?
Yeah, I think sin's it's a difficult word for us, because like we've been brought up in a culture where it's like been shouted on the streets at us. It's almost like this aggressive, negative thing on us. And yes, sin is negative, but I think until we embrace it and understand it's a reality, whether it's negative or not. And I think until we understand that it is a reality and we embrace the fact that the Bible teaches all of us have done it, then we'll never find freedom, because we don't know what we're stuck to. I guess if I have to define sin, I think the easiest way for me to define it is sin is when we do the things that God never designed us to do. Like, sin is when we live in a way that God never designed us to live. Like, God has plans and purposes and they're good for us. And whenever we live contrary to that, then it's sin. And I think Natalie kind of touched on it there a little bit. Like, God puts these guidelines in place, and He doesn't do it because He's like some authoritarian headmaster type figure. He does it because He's like a good father that loves us. And if we understand that, then we will want to follow what He says and what He gives us to follow, and follow those guidelines and follow those rules, if that's what you want to call them. And He puts those in place because He knows what's best for us. Like a parent puts things in place for their kid, like, don't do this, do this, because they know what's best for them, even when they don't understand it, and even when they can't see it, and even when it makes sense, that just makes no sense to them, then they follow it because God is a good father, and we need to understand Him. if we want to understand sin and freedom well. I guess a good analogy that I have for it, for like people getting trapped in it, it's kind of like a web, like a spider's web. I used to watch, like when I was a kid, like on repeat, like David Attenborough videos back then. But I used to watch these David Attenborough videos, and he, like, you seen like a spider's web, and like a fly or something landed in the web, and then the fly would try to free itself. But as it tried to free itself, it only got more stuck. And then the more stuck it got, the more trouble it was in. And I guess sin's a bit like that. Like once we're in it, if we can try to free ourselves from it if we want, but we only end up more stuck in it. And the more stuck in it, then the more we try, then the more stuck in it. It's like this never-ending cycle, because actually the only person that can free us from it is Jesus. Like he's the only person. Jesus comes and cuts that web and lets us out and frees us from it. We couldn't get there on our own. And so sin is, when we live in a way that God never intended us to live and do things that God never intended us to do, and we get stuck because we just can't get out of it. The Bible says all of us have sinned and we all fall short of the glory of God, and we just can't get out of it on our own.
Now, I'm just going to come to you and a wee bit on what Darren said there. And he said it to talk about how we can't beat sin, and talked there about the spider analogy and getting stuck in the web, and the more we're trying to free ourselves. In terms of people who are maybe out there trying to help themselves improve their lives, or maybe are struggling with addictions and trying to battle them by themselves, and if they hear that tonight and think, well, I can't beat sin, what's the actual point of trying? What would you say to them?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important to highlight that not one of us are perfect at all. In fact, the only one that I know is perfect is Jesus. And I would definitely argue that while we're not going to achieve that perfect life by ourselves, that anything that is unhealthy and that could actually stop you from experiencing this freedom of God that we're chatting about, to try and make some effort to cut that out is definitely worthwhile. I think the more stuff that we let get in the way of us meeting with God and getting to know him better, things like addictions or even just poor lifestyle habits and choices that we could maybe try and avoid, I think is definitely important, to sort of put them out of the way and to make room that we can focus on God and who he is. And obviously that's so much easier said than done. There's so many people I know that are my age even that are struggling with addictions that seem like they could be going on for someone much older, that are nearly beyond their years of handling. And so I think it's easier to say it than for them to actually practice that. But what I love about God is that I don't have to have anything all together and sitting perfect when I go before him, that actually I can just go as myself, and that is part of that freedom of relationship of knowing him, that I can just come as exactly as I am with all of my flaws and my issues, and I bring them before God. So I think definitely to try and put those out of the way, but not to let that stop you at all from coming before God and experiencing this freedom that we're talking about. So yeah, definitely the less distractions that we have in place make it easier to have this relationship with God and experience all that he has planned out for us. He wants more than the very best for us. So it's definitely a step in the right direction to meeting with God, and having even these addictions or habits that we might even consider a temporary escape. It's only temporary. The freedom of God is eternal and everlasting, and so that's something that we need to keep the forefront of our mind. And I know that I would rather pursue something that is eternal and long lasting rather than something that's only temporary.
Thanks, Natalie. Hilary, there's something I want to go on to that sort of Natalie's touched on a bit there about how as Christians we still are imperfect. We still can be selfish and do things wrong, feel shame and guilt, and be anxious or fearful. Darren was saying in his message that Jesus could set us free from many things. So as someone listening to that who maybe isn't a Christian, they may be thinking, what has Jesus set them free from if they're still experiencing all these emotions and things going on in their lives and still maybe doing things wrong? So explain just what exactly it is Jesus sets people free from, for people who may think it's not working very well by looking at some Christians.
Yeah, sure. This is a really important question, and I suppose how I would answer it and how I've been thinking about it is that the Christian life is a journey into the freedom that we've already been given. And I'm a mum to 2 girls, as I said before, and this last Christmas we got them guinea pigs. And up until a month ago, Bobby and Blake lived in a little cage inside our house. But that got not ideal because the smell and the mess of them was not brilliant. So my father-in-law made them a little hutch with a massive run attached to it. And of course, we thought these guinea pigs would have been right out into that run after being in the small space for so long. But 3 weeks on, they were still hiding in the hutch. And we had to coax them out with carrots and gently guide them out of there and encourage them to explore their new surroundings. And, you know, as Christians, our sure and certain hope is that Jesus dealt with all of our failures and fears and addictions forever, once for all on the cross. But we're imperfect people. Just like Natalie said, you know, just like anybody, we struggle with stuff and we need God's help to guide us into the freedom that we've already been given. And he reveals to us those confined spaces, those little boxes that we're living in, and he helps us to walk out of them into release and acceptance and joy and peace and new hope in him. And there's a verse I love in the Psalm 18, that says, he brought me out into a spacious place. He rescued me because he delighted in me. And for me, that spacious place has been freedom from perfectionism, from being stuck in a box of my own high standards for years and years. But Jesus has guided me out of that place, and he's gently encouraged me to try new things, not to be paralyzed by fear anymore. And it's brought a wonderful freedom to my life, because Jesus not only secures my freedom, he guides me into it. And I suppose that's the good news for Christians and people who don't believe in Jesus. It's good news for us all.
Hilary, just coming back to you then, for someone who's maybe living a life who's not Christian but finds purpose and joy and peace in it, what would you say to them that, in terms of their thought process, that would be different from us as Christians?
Okay, so I would probably say to someone like that becoming a Christian isn't actually about adding good feelings to an already happy or nice life. You know, it's about absolute internal freedom and complete transformation. And that's why the Bible talks about it as being born again, because it's a new start, it's a new life, and it's knowing that you need complete forgiveness for everything that you've done wrong, and you need to be declared free and not guilty by a God who is holy and who is pure and who is just. But it's also not a message that's just about this life. It's a message that speaks to what happens after we die too, because we're all going to give an account to God at some point for our lives, whether we lived for ourselves or whether we lived for him. And many people I talk to don't actually believe that God's going to hold them accountable for how they've lived their lives or how they've chosen to follow or not to follow Jesus. But there's a real problem with this view, actually, because if God doesn't hold us to account, then he won't hold anyone to account. And then we have the issue of there being no ultimate justice for all the wrongs that have been done throughout history. So the message of Christianity is bigger than just me, than just my individual joy or happiness or even purpose. It's about freedom of the whole of humanity from God's judgment, and also an eternity free from the presence of everything that is wrong with this life.
Natalie, could I just ask you personally, what does being a Christian mean to you? What would you say to anyone who's watching this who isn't a Christian?
Yeah, I think one of the really significant things about being a Christian for me is being loved and wanted, like beyond my understanding, more than I could even get my head around. That's how much God is really head over heels in love with me. And I think for some people that might be an unusual thing for them. I obviously don't know everybody's background stories, what home life they're going through, but there are people who don't feel wanted. And so what I would say is that God wants you beyond your understanding, more than you can ever comprehend. He is head over heels in love with you, and he wants a relationship with you. He desires that with you. I spend every day living in constant amazement of who God is. There's so many things I just can't get my head around. God is total peace for me. He's comfort. He's generous. He's really gentle. He's creative and he's powerful, and he's so much more. Like, I don't even have the words for God most of the time. But yeah, the more I get to know him, the more I spend time with him, the more that I fall in love with him as well. And I know obviously we were chatting about maybe some of the sacrifices, I guess you'd call them that, and even giving things up for God, the rules or the commands that he's given us that Christians try to follow. But I think well, actually, I know that God's so worth it. He's worth giving things up for. And in fact, I don't think I give enough up for him. And so that's a challenge, but it's something exciting to strive towards. And then the other element I would sort of add to that is I feel responsible that other people should know about God, but it's only because honestly God's too good for me to keep to myself. I can't keep him to myself. He's so exciting. He's everything that I've said and far more. And so yeah, I love having a relationship with God. And so what I would say to people who don't follow Jesus, who don't know him, and who aren't maybe getting to know him in that way at the minute, if you don't have a relationship with God, I promise you that it's so worth it. There's nothing that I've experienced that could come close to it. And even if I could use all my words, it couldn't possibly show off enough who God is. He's just incredible and is literally beyond my own description. I don't have words for him. So yeah, and to experience the freedom that we've chatted about tonight is something that I would encourage everyone to try and look into and pursue for yourselves.
That's great, Natalie. Thank you very much. That leads us greatly into our next question to Darren. Darren, you talked in your message about taking a step towards Jesus. What does that mean to somebody listening tonight? And if somebody wanted to know more about following Jesus and find that freedom in him, how would they do that?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things about God is that God, like, he's not after robots. Like, he's after like relationship with us. He's not forcing anyone into anything. He just like offers it to us. And I guess if I could describe it, it was like this massive like journey, like this massive chasm that we couldn't ever bridge and we couldn't ever get across. But God has done like all of the journey except that last step. And that last step is all he asks of me. So I kind of picture in my mind, like, Jesus has done all of that. Like he died for us. He paid the price for our sin, and he's done all of that journey. And then it's just on me for the last step. And I guess I like to picture him like standing there, arms open wide, just like waiting on me or waiting on people to come to him. And I guess when I talk about the last step or stepping towards him, like that's in my mind what I'm picturing. Like, Jesus has done all of this for you, and now it's just up to you for the last step. And I guess the reality is then I can choose as a human being, am I going to take it or am I not? Like, I can take the step towards him, or I can turn around and try to do the journey on my own. It's entirely up to us as individuals, because God's not after robots. He's after relationship with us. And really, it's honestly like so simple. I guess whenever I first ever started to think about Jesus, I thought it was really difficult. Like, maybe if I could do this in the right way at the right time, I could maybe start to impress God, and then, maybe he'd be happier with me then, and maybe he'd love me more then, and maybe then I could step towards him. But like, there's nothing we can do to make God love us more. And so all it takes from me is to step towards him. Like, and I would say, like, if that's something that somebody wants to do, it's honestly just as easy as just talk to him. Like, he's there, he's listening, he's so close, he's so interested in all of us, and so interested in whoever's listening and whoever's thinking about that, regardless of whether you feel like he is or he's not. He's right there, and all he's waiting on you is to begin, just speak to him. It's as simple as, God, I want to give my life to you. Jesus, I'll accept all that you've done for me. Like, the night I gave my life to God, my prayer, I guess I didn't know it was a prayer at the time, was like, Jesus, if you were real, I would follow you. That was it. Like, that was it. I was in. And that was enough for me and Jesus to begin to journey together and to do life together. Like, there's lots of people around that would have that conversation with you. Like, message this Facebook page, like, find any of us, like, message us. We'd love to chat it out with you if you want to do that. But honestly, there's no formula and there's no equation. We just say yes to him, give our lives to him, give him all of the sin and the shame and the guilt and all of those things that we don't want to carry anymore. And there's this beautiful exchange where he gives us life and joy and freedom, and we start this journey of walking and talking with God. And so, yeah, there's a beautiful exchange available to anybody that wants it. And yeah, what we have to do is take that step towards him.
Thanks, Darren, and thanks to all of you for all your answers. There's some difficult questions there, and you have done really well answering them. And can we just say to anybody watching who has any more questions about anything that's been discussed, or who maybe wants to ask more about becoming a Christian, you can go onto the Elim Ireland website for more information, or you can email us your questions, and those details will be coming up on the screen now. Please join us again next week for our final Words of Hope, which will be at 7:30 next Sunday evening. And our speaker that week will be Charlotte Curran.
Thanks again for joining us in this Words for Hope, and have a great week.